Loading. Yeah, we're almost there. Okay, we are almost live. We may be live. I'm just going to start the recording.
Okay. I'd like to call.
One second, Lisa, 1 second. I just have to start the recording. I'm so sorry.
Okay, no worries.
Okay, you should be all set.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'd like to call to order the special board meeting of the Ossining School Board, April 21st, 2020 meeting. Now I'll ask Illy to please show our flag. Thank you. And if everybody would join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please rise. Catherine, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the
United States of
America,
and
and to the republic
for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under God, indivisible, with liberty
and
and justice for all. Thank you. And then I just want to take a few moments. I want to do a moment of silence for the many lives that have been lost to the coronavirus and to the families that are suffering right now. So please join me in a moment of silence. Okay, thank you. I want to start off by hoping everybody who's on this call is doing well. And thank you for folks out there watching tonight. If you have a question and you're in the Zoom meeting, we're going to ask you to virtually raise your hand, and then we will open up your mic and your camera, and at the time allocated in the meeting, you can ask your question or give a comment. So we really appreciate everybody that's here. And also, this is being recorded and will be on our website tomorrow. So I'd like to turn it over, if Illy would bring up, Illy, if you could bring up our presentation, okay. And I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Sanchez.
Hey, can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
You can hear me okay? Thank you.
Yes.
All right, so good evening, everyone, to the Board of Education and those that are in the audience watching. This is just a short update, although some important information on where we are as a school district related to our response to coronavirus and how we're adapting as a school system, and also to continue our discussions around the budget. Albeit, I think at the last board meeting, we referenced that April 30th is a very important date, and I'll make reference to that in this presentation as we try to finalize our budget for the 2021 school year. Okay, Lee. So I'm going to turn it over to Carrie Ann Sipos and Dr. Brian Alm to share a little bit about our shifts as it relates to curriculum and instruction. As been noted in previous correspondence, there's been more of an asynchronous environment, and we're going to be shifting very, very soon, as early as next week, into more of a synchronous environment. And I thought both Ms. Sipos and Dr. Alm would share a little update as to what that might look like. The other part of it too, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the staff and everyone and our leaders, everyone that's really been working hard to support student needs since our, what I'll term physical school closure. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Sipos, and then Dr. Alm will follow.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
So as we leave behind phase 2 of remote learning and enter what we're calling phase 3, as Dr. Sanchez shared, we will be adding synchronous practices to remote learning for all of our children. Classroom teachers are at this moment and in this phase are being asked to conduct 2 15-minute synchronous SEL meetings per week. I do want to preface all of this by saying these are our guidelines, but teachers have lots of flexibility depending on their comfort level to do or add more synchronous practices. But the expectation for right now is 2 15-minute synchronous SEL meetings per week. Special education has just undergone some huge meetings and discussions about going live with their practices, and they are outlined in details depending on the subgroup of special educators. So like speech and language teachers have some guidelines, related services guidelines, ICT guidelines, depending on the way they teach, the number of kids in their caseloads. So they will be also bringing synchronous practices to their work. Special area teachers, like people that are offering PE, music and art, they are also going to be conducting 2 15-minute synchronous sessions with kids to bring their asynchronous work to life. So they're going to be asking kids to join them and talk about what they've been doing with the asynchronous activities that have been passed on through classroom slides. Reading teachers, ENL teachers, because of their caseloads and the number, of kids per day that they work with, they are being asked to do 1 synchronous session per week with all their kids. You should know when you start to do this work, what happens is that there's a real need for a master schedule, like who's meeting with kids at what time, speech, language, ICT, reading teachers, ENL teachers, special teachers. So we are just working together with our staff to create what we're calling a kind of new master schedule for the scheduling of all the support and the synchronous times of the new sessions ahead. There's more to come with plans for our library media specialists and stream teachers, though you should probably know, Mickey Lockwood and I are already, we're going live tomorrow to do something really fun for Earth Day. And as I shared at the start of this, these are the expectations in phase 3, but teachers have flexibility to bring more with comfort and understanding. The other thing that I do want to say, as I said before, there is an enormous commitment to building the capacity of our educators. And I say it over and over and over again when I think about where we started and where we are today. There's been enormous learning and enormous growth and enormous effort on behalf of all of our educators to do really good things for our children. And we are at a process of change, and we are being responsive and listening and adjusting as with every new challenge and the new learning that comes our way. We work on it, and we just every day just try to get better. I'm really proud of the Ossining educators.
Thank you. I want to begin by echoing those sentiments. Just a tremendous amount of effort to stay nimble and adapt to everyone's needs and be able to meet all of our students' needs in the best way possible, while at the same time, preserving the effort that have already taken place and not inadvertently dismantling some of the great work that's going out there. So in the secondary level, we created a very flexible set schedule that minimally asks for virtual office hours available, 20 to 30 minutes per week, per class, per section. Some with that now availability and a schedule where they won't be kind of competing with one another or creating conflicts. Some educators may choose to use that time to go live. The schedule, also a big part of the schedule is to create a daily structure as much as possible, to the extent possible, some structure and routine for our students and for our educators and for families to be able to have something that's predictable. In general, overall, the goal is to help make this less overwhelming for everybody, provide a great deal of flexibility, and ultimately to minimize screen time, because the folks that have embraced this really well, and they've been able to, and their family situations have allowed them to do so, we're spending entirely too much time on devices. So we want to be able to, preserve our quality of education, but at the same time, make sure that folks aren't glued to devices throughout the day. The other overarching, or not the other, but the most important overarching piece of all of this is about socio-emotional learning. It's tending to the extent possible to the socio-emotional needs of everyone, of all stakeholders involved. It's important for our folks to be able to reconnect. I'm happy to report that, late last week on Friday, AMD went live, so to speak, with each grade. They had grade level assemblies, and our students really adapted to those protocols very quickly by, the etiquette with muting and raising their hand for questions. And we had well over 80 students in at least a couple of those sessions. So that's the secondary stat.
So this represents our next step, and we're continuing to evolve. Actually, we just put out a survey to families. We're getting information that will be very, very helpful for us in terms of what's working, and also to taking into account what might be necessary for us to continue in our evolution. But again, I think it's been shared twice at least, but I'll say it again. Just sincere gratitude to our families, to our educators, and everyone else involved during this period of time. So I'm going to transition now to the budget. This is on Saturday, or so, excuse me, on Sunday, Governor Cuomo, in his traditional manner, has been giving updates as it relates to where we are and as it relates to in response to the coronavirus, giving information on cases, and then also speaking to the fiscal components of our state, more specifically the impact that it's having on our state. He was a little more detailed, particularly on Sunday, as it relates to what the impact could be to our state, and then in turn to our schools should he not receive additional federal aid. And he called for, and you can see the details more so on April 30th, where he might need to make some more dramatic steps that could potentially impact our school district in the now, not next year, but now, and could potentially have trickling effects into next year as well. So I just thought, these are just some of the details, but I just thought Ms. Zuber can give a little bit of sort of like, what does it mean for Ossining? Should we receive, should he cut state aid and more directly impact schools?
Hi, everybody. We've already received a significant portion of the aid that's due to the school for the year. However, there's still about $5 million that's due to this school district. And if he does, in fact, cut aid this year, I heard 50%. The last time he spoke, then we would be short $2.5 million. And that would mean that our fund balance would be reduced by that amount.
So, right now, and actually I just prepared a letter that'll be sent out to our community, just asking, our community along with our educators to reach out to our representatives so that they fully understand and we advocate on behalf of our school district, and, ask our federal government to intervene to help support our state specifically in this case. Okay, Ailey. Okay, so back to the budget. We continue to dialogue, and we kind of in a wait and see, we continue to evolve and have discussions, but I do want to share a little bit about, more specifically about the capital line. The facility subcommittee met last night. That includes Ms. Crossling, Mr. Galiff, and Mr. Snecker, along with Alita Zuber and Jared Mance, our Director of Facilities. This was the original proposal when we first presented the budget, the superintendent's budget. It included additions to Brookside School to address space, various safety items under what we call maintenance, HVAC in the weight room, elevator renovations, unit ventilators, and gym windows to help with air circulation, specifically at Claremont and Brookside, but also addressing safety measures as relates to those windows. And then the library and guidance spaces would be included, and the A&D outdoor space, addressing the blacktop area, which we've also could, I guess, term not only for our student space, but also a safety measure as well. We've since then edited, we met last night, and Illy, would you mind going to the next one? Right now we're recommending the removal of the renovations to the OHS library, more specifically because we feel like we can seek to try to address the space in the now, renovating and make sure that the space better supports the needs of our students. In lieu of that, we're recommending at this point the what we'll call the connector on the third floor. The flow of students, this would help with obviously addressing the traffic flow of our students, keeping in mind that we have 1,500 students walking the halls of Ossining High School. There is no connections from third floor to third floor. This often comes up in conversations among our students as well, and it would also provide some flexible space for students. So you see a small little photo, but it would not only just address students being able to go from one section of the building to the other, and I should include staff as well, but also providing some sort of flexible seating for our students should they not be in the library, other spaces within the building. So the next slide, Illy. So this would be basically our new proposal for the capital line, maintaining the work at Brookside, maintaining the work under maintenance, and then in turn, removing the library space and inserting the third floor connector, and again, addressing the guidance space. The middle school project, the board may recall, was removed because we anticipate doing some of that work now, just improving the blacktop and also trying to provide some what we'll term playground space for our students and just some flexible space for our students during lunch and recess when they return. So this is our newest recommendation. Aside from that, this is just a quick reminder, a big meeting for us, for the board and our community will be May 6th, because we'll have a better sense of what our state aid is, what the governor has done. And then in turn, hopefully very soon after that, have a budget that we can adopt and present to our community. Keeping in mind that we have not inserted a slide that says when the budget vote is, because there's really it seems to be a moving target at this point. We've heard June 1st as a potential date, but there's still a lot of details that we do not know, including how the voting would take place, whether it's through ballots electronically or individuals physically enter the building to vote. All that, I guess we'll learn more, as time as we continue to proceed and go forward. So that's our quick update on where we are. Want to thank the facility subcommittee for meeting what seems to be every week to talk about options, and thank everyone again for their patience in this process. And as every day we continue to get information, we continue to adapt and solidify our decisions relative to the budget.
All right, thank you. And I'd like to open it up to the board to ask questions about any part of the presentation. So just unmute your mic and ask away.
Okay, I'll start. I have, number one, thank you, everybody. I know we're all working really hard, and I think that the reality is starting to sink in that this distance learning is unfortunately is going to be a long time. So I'm happy to see that we're bringing a synchronous element to it. Really, really happy. And I just had a couple of clarification questions, just because I think the acronym sometimes gets confused with special education. When we were talking at the elementary level, and it was the classroom is going to have two 15-minute synchronous SEL. Can you just explain when you mean SEL, what does that mean, just for those of us who are watching?
Sure, thanks. It's social and emotional learning. This is about really checking in with our kids emotionally, being sure that they're all doing okay, and that they're getting through these challenges as little people and with their families. So it's really a check-in on how they are feeling and if they need anything, and just beginning in healthy ways to talk about this experience and be sure everybody's okay.
Okay. And then I was wondering, is the plan for that like as a group? Is it individual check-ins?
So right now they're going to be doing whole class check-ins, like real circle time, so that the kids can not only talk about things, but also see all their friends. That's the entrance into this. They haven't seen each other. Some of them haven't seen anybody. So just to be able to be with their whole class and what we usually term our, morning circles, that's the entrance into this.
And then following from that, is there a plan if there's new instruction to do any kind of new instruction sort of in a similar way? Is that sort of like, if it goes okay, that's sort of the next step? Just wondering what thoughts were.
In future phases, there's a real spot for reflecting on how the entrance into this is going, and to consider what else it will bring us in the future for our children.
Okay. Something just popped into my head. Let me see if I can retrieve it real quick. Oh, yes. Is there room for any kind of, right now, or maybe it's planned, like if we see how this goes, just wondering how dual language might sort of fit into the synchronous element of all of this.
Well, they're participating in the same way that all classes are. So they will be running SEL, social emotional learning circles with their students. And then depending on what we decide when we go forward, we need to think about the distribution of, language learning in the way that we do when we are in classes, and plan accordingly around that. But yeah, they are fully engaged in this, and will be as we take and shift practices in the future.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. Just remind me, because I got a voicemail about it, but I couldn't listen to the whole thing, and Harrison just came in here during this meeting and deleted it. How do we access your presentation tomorrow afternoon?
Oh, so there was an oblast sent out today by Nicole Reese.
Okay.
And in there is a link to my new site, which is called Going Live with Mrs. Sipos.
Okay.
And right before, around 12:45, I'm pushing out a link to my site. So on the oblast, there's a link to get to my site. Around 12:45, there'll be a live link to get in at 1 o'clock. And I'm doing that for real safety and security reasons. I'm using a nickname kind of a link, so that it's a one and done deal, and nobody can ever get into it ever again, and it's safe.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Oblast to my site, Live with Mrs. Sipos.
Okay.
Thanks.
Right. Okay.
Okay, I'll go next. So thank you for the updates regarding elementary and secondary. I'm pleased to see that things are, evolving and, rising to the level that they, the students needed to be. I have a question regarding students, indoor caregivers that have essentially maybe not been participating or even heard from since the online learning has officially begun. And what are some of the ways that we're kind of reaching out to those families, be it through wellness checks or just some kind of way to make sure that they're okay, or the whole year
Mhm.
doesn't go past and they've not been engaged, other than they're not, there.
Yeah, so I'll speak to that, and then others can jump in if necessary. This has been a real challenge for all of us, and I mean that just in general, because what we've learned, and I would just generally say, is it's revealed even greater inequities that exist within the system, right, within our community, whether it's connectivity, whether it's access to a computer, whether it's multiple computers that families need, right? Because they may have more than one child and they need to be on technology, and all that. Our system continues to evolve. There's been daily more than multiple calls made to families on an ongoing basis from our teaching assistants and other social workers, guidance clinicians, to try to reach families. All that to say, and to your point, Ms. Banta, is that there are some families we're really struggling to reach right now. And so we actually are meeting as early as tomorrow. We have the data, we have the information, but we need to start elevating even further, our efforts to reach them. We know anecdotally some information, but I just got to give you a sense. Everyone is trying to get to them. I spoke to a building principal, or we spoke to a building principal who referenced the fact that they contacted the person's doctor to get to, finally get to the family, and were successful in doing so. And actually, Ms. Rudley and I were part of a community meeting where we talked about working with our entire community to try to reach, whether that's using, Neighbors Link, whether it's using Open Door, the powerful community partners that we have, and seeing if they can also assist us in this process. Tomorrow morning, we're having a meeting with some of our assistant principals to start systematize this, looking at this even further and developing even stronger plans. There's been a lot of effort, but it's time for us to kind of make some shifts, because just continuing to make phone calls and maybe even reaching out to some is maybe not as successful for everybody. For some of the families that clearly we know aren't necessarily engaging to the levels that we need them to. And I would say that, probably early tomorrow, I can give you even further steps that we're taking, but there's a lot of effort being taken. All that to say is that I can't say with certainty that we've been all that successful. We haven't, in reaching some families. It's been basically what keeps us all up at night, along with obviously the other shifts that are taking place. Knowing that, some students aren't necessarily as engaged as we need them to be. And we're worried. I mean, that's the other part. We're worried because, when there's darkness, we don't necessarily know all the details, and we need to understand their stories at this point. So, we're shifting our plans, like the phase 3 that you just saw, to start looking at other alternatives to get to some of these families in different ways than we have to this point.
Okay. Just to jump over to the side of when you're discussing some of the plans that the governor has financially for the budget, just in terms of the advocacy that you were talking about, I think that would be a good idea as well. I don't know if the rest of the board members saw on the update from Westchester Putnam School Board Association, but Pleasantville is one of the districts that are actually, advocating on behalf of the district through the community as well to, hopefully secure some federal funds, and also even try to, if I'm not mistaken, find ways for some of the parameters around reserve use to kind of be, a bit more flexible. So I think that's probably something, the advocacy committee can possibly start exploring to try to get, some more support behind that, because we're definitely going to need um, some support from that, if, from the federal angle.
Yeah, it's a good point. Tomorrow we'll be putting out a letter. I just sent it to the administrators tonight, but it'll go out to the community. See, and actually we've reached out just softly to Ossining for fair funding and all our, our community members that help in this area to begin, lifting this from making calls at minimum. But there's much more that we can do, and Pleasantville is obviously serves as an example, and I think we can learn from them as well as we go forward. But thank you for that.
Greg?
Yeah, a couple things. I guess on that in terms of advocacy, a couple of thoughts. Clearly, it sounds like nothing's going to happen by the 30th. Sounds like Congress is somewhat committed to doing something eventually. And I sort of get the big picture on some of this stuff. They need to understand the magnitude of how much they need to fund. So I think they'll fund it, but yeah, I think it was the Westchester Putnam School Board had a link in one of their emails to share with the community. I don't know if that's something you could put in your letter. It's certainly something to get out to fair funding. Everyone's at home. We should be getting 1,000, of those linked letters sent to Congress just to make sure. Clearly Cuomo's telling them every day that he needs money, but thousands of clicked emails. I don't think they're, I'm sure Congress is hearing about, there's issues they're hearing about, but on unemployment and other important ones of the day, but a lot of the ones they probably normally hear about, they're not hearing about. So it'd be great to make some noise. I know that was one link. I don't know if other people have links they put together or we do our own, but that would be fantastic. It gets to our editorial. I worry about this whole schools closed notion. I know my kids keep talking about 36 states have closed schools as of today. Massachusetts. I don't know what we need to do mindset wise. If New York does close, I like New York's approach and not having closed, because at least in those parental conversations you can say school's not closed, even though to all 36 states who've closed, they're still having school. And occasionally people point out, the school building is closed, school's not closed. And we kind of need to be ready for that campaign, if not now, when it, if and when we do close the buildings for the year, that we've really hit home the school's still in session, still need to be on the calls, parents still, kids still need to do their work. So I think we're kind of talking to people around the country. I think we're somewhat at an advantage because we haven't closed officially like other states have, but it's obviously still a great focus to have. I don't know. I know we moved our start day ahead, 8 minutes or 14 minutes a couple of years ago, based on all those studies of how late kids sleep. I think if we redid that study, we might move it like 2 hours ahead, given how kids seem to be sleeping. I'm guessing teachers, and again, I did a high school classmate Zoom the other day, OHS classmates around the country, and everyone's kids are sleeping until noon. Doesn't matter where you are in the country. So I assume there's some sensitivity that, we're not, and this may or not be true at the elementary school, but I assume teachers aren't going to schedule their sessions before, 10. I don't know if that sort of words got out there. I think my son had one at 10:30, he set his alarm for it, and it sort of worked. But just something to be, I'm guessing if we scheduled it 8:30 or 9 during normal school hours, we would no doubt lose some kids in this environment, which I don't know if we need to fight that battle. And then the last thing, just to add a little more color on the library project. I think what, you guys saw a couple versions of possible designs that we looked at for the library. And I think as we looked at them a couple times, we kept coming back to, they were giving us little incremental benefits, but they cost a lot of money, and it just never felt completely, worth the money that we're talking about. And I think, Ray and Stephen and Jared did some more work between our last two meetings and came up with, I think what we felt real comfortable, much more comfortable with as a, not free, but 25% less, if not more, kind of solution to really revamp the library without having to gut it. Really just, redo what's there without moving walls, moving stairs, moving, stuff that would get into, lots and lots of money, and yet be a more usable space, more friendly space. But this isn't finalized, but create a corner where people maybe can eat in there, efficiently and safely, and without creating too much of a mess, and just really use, create more group space that's already there. It's just kind of hidden behind, closed off glass windows and stuff on the second floor. So I think I felt really good about the conversation we had last night, which then in that third floor connector, which we talked about, was in the original bond. What was that, 9 or 10 years ago? That's something that probably was always, probably should have been connected years ago. It's not going to get done, most likely wouldn't get done for a year, not this summer, but the next summer. It's not the answer to social distancing, but it's a little dent of, you create one more pathway. Again, it's not the reason to do the project, but short-term and long-term, it's a big school that, we've always had trouble getting kids from place to place in 4 minutes, and having that connector helps that significantly, and also create space for kids just to hang out in, during periods. So just wanted to add that commentary on that piece of it. So I thought that was a really good outcome of the work and looking at the library. And then I think we're really being smart with the money we're spending, and getting a lot for what we would spend. I think that's it.
I just want to thank you, Greg. I just want to remind our audience that once the board is completed asking questions and making comments, we're going to go to the audience. And I see someone has raised their hand, and what we're going to do is we will show your screen, camera, and we will unmute your mic, and we'll allow you, have you ask your question or comments. I just want to remind some people or just share that with the audience, because I see some people have just joined us. So just wanted to make sure that everybody has an opportunity on the board to comment or ask questions regarding the update on distant learning and the budget update. And just unmute your mic if you want to ask a question.
Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Can you hear me all right? Oh.
Stick with the
Can
phone.
you hear me?
Yep, that's good.
Okay. All right. So I just had two questions. One, on the secondary level, how are we, and you don't have to answer this tonight, but how are we monitoring like proficiency when it comes to classes that I'm going to call building block classes? In other words, classes where you're going to learn skills that you need for a class moving forward, like from Spanish 1 to Spanish 2, from algebra to geometry or algebra 2. How are we, given the cancellation of the Regencies and the proficiency tests, how are we monitoring that? And on a secondary level or on a elementary level, how are we keeping track of the reading levels and where kids are reading at, especially third grade, where you're going from learning to read to reading to learn. So if you don't, again, we don't have to speak on that tonight, but I just wanted to get that out there for an update in the future.
Okay, so that's going to be answered in the future. Okay. Thank you, Aaron. Anybody else? I have a couple of questions myself, but wanted to give anybody else a chance. So if we could just talk a little bit about technology and access and how we're doing there, and then add a little bit about the Pace University students that are offering tutoring services. And on the elementary school level, I know I'm really glad to see that there are going to be some more class meetings and the connections there. So thank you for that update. And so really want to go to just talking about that everybody has, and also supplies. That we're looking to see that make sure that all families, because again, just reminding everybody, we keep saying it, that every home is different, every situation is different. And we have, 5,000 students and, maybe 3,600 families and 3,600 household, and completely every household is different and every situation is different. So it's monumental to even be able to shift so quickly in these dramatic changes. And I want to just say, just really appreciate all that work that has gone in, and all the assemblies and the virtual learning that's going on, the connections for videos to do some after school videos. There's just so much, actually. I can't even keep up with everything. And then, with read alouds and all those great things. But I just want to really just talk about families, the access to technology and access to internet, and the tutoring that's been initiated today. Maybe
I'll try to address, and I'll give you everything we have. The technology pieces, we've made every effort and continue to make every effort to make sure that if families and or students need the technology, that we're providing for them. Even though we've done massive distributions of computers, we continue to hear of others that may need technology. And some of it is because they have, siblings in their brothers and sisters that need the computer as well. Initially, we started off by giving one per family, and we realized that, in an effort to really support the learning, that we need to change that. So moving forward, we're actually looking to create a system, and we're continue to obviously distribute, but where if need be, potentially using the security entrance at the high school as a sort of a distribution site, where we would just, as families make us aware of their needs, we can encourage them to go there upon appointment to go pick up. If distance and getting there is a challenge for them, of course, we'll make other arrangements. So it doesn't, don't want to give the sense that that's the only way in which we, and if it is a barrier, we'll choose to go a different route, i.e. if we have to bring it to someone's home, we'll do that. If we have to, whatever it would take. So that's where we are at this point. And as I noted before, to Ms. Banta's, question as well, we realize that there are some families that we still need to continue to connect with. And it hasn't been, again, without concerted efforts on behalf of the entire staff. It's been everyone on deck to really do this. The piece of the Pace University students, that's a partnership that we're establishing. I just have to say in general that I think as a school district, we're the work that we did around and have been doing around community schools helps us in better, sort of in this space, because we're not looking to form partnerships. We have partnerships. And I think it goes a long way in, responding to the various needs that we have, whether it's our partnership with Open Door, whether it's our partnership with Neighbors Link, and so on and so on. Specifically with PACE, we've had a longstanding relationship, and we're working with their students in the education department or the future teachers to serve as tutors. But I want to thank Andrea Nardella, who's our administrative intern that has been working to sort of help facilitate that. Ms. Sipos has had a strong hand in helping sort of lift that as well. So I don't know, Kirian, do you want to add anything else related to that?
I just wanted to say that as of yesterday, I think we are tutoring 75 children, and we're working on some creative ways to use some staffing to meet the needs of the other families that raise their hands. So it's very hopeful and it's very exciting.
So and I just have to say that in general, it just makes sense, obviously, to create a structure like that. It's mutually beneficial for the kids and beneficial for these students that are our future teachers to work, and obviously the human connection that we want to create as well. So, and if it can help support the academics, that's also obviously the lens that we're looking at as well. And obviously the SEL, social-emotional components of this are really important. So it's a little bit of an explore. Want to refer to it as a pilot. That's probably the most appropriate term, but I can't see how there's any at this point any harm in going forward and for creating these structures. We're very thankful for PACE in their partnership and for everyone that's helped to lift the start of it. There's been a positive response, or a number of families that have requested the support, and we'll see how we can expand from there depending on how it goes.
Great. And could you just share with us the amount of times a week you're surveying secondary and elementary students? Is it once a week for the secondary?
Once a week for the secondary. Just a quick note on that. Some educators on the secondary level are doing their own check-ins via form. So some feedback we have gotten is that it is a lot for them to do the Wednesday check-in and then do some periodic check-ins with all of their up to 8 or 9 teachers. So that's something we're going to be looking at closely, moving forward.
Okay. And on the elementary level?
So we continue to ask kids and families to reflect every single day with 2 simple questions. How's schoolwork going, as a way of monitoring, keeping track of how kids are doing and getting that feedback from them and families. And then the second one is just, how are you feeling? Being sure we're checking in on their social and emotional, wellness. I would say there's a varying degree of consistency in the participation of that document, and we are thinking through that. But right now, we still ask our families and their children to reflect every single day.
Okay, great. And then just an update on the breakfast and lunch grab and go, how that's working at Park. I know we're doing it 11 to 1, 5 days a week.
Correct. Actually, if you give me a minute, I'm going to check my phone because Star Dinio actually sent us data today. So total meals served. Go ahead, Alita. Sorry.
Today was 704, but the total meals served to date is 17,462.
So since March, like 18th, like 17th, 18th?
17,462.
Okay. And we feel, I know we had 2 locations and now we went to 1. We feel that space is, I know we divided up by the last name, and that's been going well.
Yes.
In terms of spacing out and spacing out people and being able to deliver. That's 740. Wow. Okay.
And we continue to provide childcare for approximately 7 community members that have expressed an interest, and that's for first responders and those quote unquote essential workers that the state has identified.
Okay, all right,
And by all accounts, that seems to be going well.
okay, great. And thank you for and then just my final question on the budget, just thank you for the update. And I know that all school districts are waiting for April 30th to get some more insight into it, into what is going to happen with state aid and going forward, not just this year, but this coming year.
Right.
So it's a moving target. So thank you. Before I open it up to the audience, I want to see if there's any more board members that have questions about the agenda items. Give everybody else a chance. Just unmute your phone.
Lisa, I just want to follow up. I think you kind of, you hinted at this question, but the question of people getting access to paper, construction paper to draw, write, do math. I know Westcott was trying to coordinate some of that. Is that, again, this, you know, if we're in this longer term, I know logistically that's not the easiest thing to get out, but are we thinking through, and I also ask because, you know, you can't, if you go to a supermarket to buy paper, that's one of, you know, everyone working at home, they bought all the printer paper and notebooks and maybe not every pen, but in addition to Chromebooks, we'll have to figure out how to get just good old fashioned paper to people.
And supplies, crayons
And, yeah,
and
the whole-
pencils
yeah.
and everything else. Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
And more books.
Yep.
And more books.
And it's all being thought of, and
Okay.
some plans are coming together for all of it.
I just wanted to say, I know that I think every parent in America probably now 4 or 5, however many weeks you're into this at this point, has like a different idea of what distance learning should be for them, and that it is impossible to do this sort of in any kind of way that is going to please everybody. So I just want to recognize that our administration and our teachers are really challenged with an inherently impossible task, and you're continuing to make changes and improvements and reflections and sort of stay the course, and it can't be easy. And I know that I know that it's difficult, and I really appreciate the efforts to keep rolling up your sleeves and digging in and doing what you do. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, before we go to any audience questions for the agenda items, I'd like to see if there's anybody else that has something to add. And there'll be more time for the board to have more dialogue after we vote on the resolutions that we have on our working session. Okay. All right, thank you, everybody. And I'd like to turn that over to see if the audience has any questions. So I'll give you an opportunity. Just on the bottom of your screen, you'll see a raise your hand. Oh, okay, you'll see a raise your hand button. Just press that. And then Brian will
Okay, we'll start with Roger.
camera
then.
view, and we're going to just ask to state your name and your address and ask your question or let us know your comment.
Does take a second.
Sure.
And says that he's here. There he goes.
And we just need to unmute his
Yep,
mic.
he'll unmute.
Great.
Hi, everybody. This is Roger Bhattacharya at 16 Holbrook Road. Glad
Roger.
to see. Hi, how are you? I'm glad to see you guys are doing well. Obviously, it's a pretty tough times. You know, lots of things are still moving parts and pieces. But I have a couple of quick questions, and then just a quick update in terms of some of the information that I've been seeing and would like to just get some reaction from it too. But first of all, yeah, I'm glad to see there's some progress that's been made on the capital projects. I'm just curious as to, obviously it sounds like you made some decisions based upon what made good financial sense from the perspective of, space to use and what the dollars were on that. What is the net budgetary effect for moving from if you will, an enhanced library or enhanced use space in the library to going to a connector bridge? That's my first question, and I'll ask the next question after that if somebody wants to.
Yeah,
jump in.
so the capital line remains flat from year to year. So I think that's the general sense. So there's we're still getting just some final estimates on the connector, but it's roughly around what we had anticipated budgeting for the library. So all in all, though, our capital line is flat.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that's great. I'm just curious as you looked at that, if the costs were relatively the same from the library to the connector bridge, I mean, just intuitively, it seems like that the library would have been more space and probably better space. It's just because I know there was different versions of that. There's one that was actually the outer part of that library was that second level was meant to be kind of like a little bit of a catwalk sort of an area, which then we were looking at that as possibly being even wider space for more study space for being like a catwalk. And
So,
go ahead.
No, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think, and we were remiss in not kind of speaking to this. What we did and really studied, it's kind of like having a small apartment and trying to capture as much space as you can within that small apartment, albeit the library is not a small place. It's a relatively large space. But what we did is we did a walkthrough. Actually, Mr. Hancock, Mr. Manson, and I were there on Friday. And I'm happy to sort of share photos more specifically as to what we're referring to. But we see, with some real strategic looks at the space, that we can gain space without building space, if that makes sense. I.e., like we have a computer station in the far right corner as you're staring to the, as you're entering the library. That's a one could argue, while the students use it, it's an inefficient use, computer stations like that. So you can gain about close to what I'll argue is around 400 square feet there. We have what we'll call a maker space that's not as used as we'd like it to, and that's another 400 plus square feet. So it's trying to maximize those spaces is really the conversation that we had with the Board of Education, and so it's gaining without adding so much, if that makes sense. So, and the other part of it too is just balancing to how much we're really pushing to have so many students in that library space. I think we want to find, a distribution over the course of, over the entire school versus, there's a free period and you got 200 kids in a library, which isn't necessarily not, or the learning commons, however we want to frame it. So that was also something that we were weighing with at the same time. The last piece, though, and I think it's important that we considered, is some of those same projects also called for a closure of the library of almost estimated work of about 8 months of real work. Closing that space for 8 months, albeit it might, doesn't preclude us from thinking about end goals, but it's a large period of time too, for us to do that, to shut something down in a building that already is what we can argue is tight for the number of students that we have. So all those, I think, weighed into the discussion with the board, and that's why we deliberated on it for such a long period of time. Is, what's the right decision considering the finances, the goal in mind, and everything else associated with it. So we think we can do some work now to sort of renovate it more efficiently, maximize the space that currently exists with real intentional, look at the function of the spaces that we have, getting some student feedback. We also talked about that as well, and staff feedback to maybe have something ready even for students when they return. The other part of this too is we want, when our staff and students and families return, we want, our spaces to look and as great as they can be for them and function and support the programs that we want.
Hopefully you should get some better labor costs as a result, because I think there's now,
Yeah.
there's more opportunity now versus there being a huge, so the demand has dropped quite a bit because of everything that's happening. So that hopefully that'll help along
We
with
talked
that.
about that. The other side to that is materials are a little more difficult to find at this point. So we've heard from our architects and construction managers. So, but you're right. The labor costs might be, it might be beneficial. And we get more bang for our buck, I guess.
Yeah, and that's usually the larger part of the cost is the labor cost. Anyway.
Yep.
Ray, I think it's important to add though that the third floor connector actually does gain us about 2,100 square footage of space and would include a student commons area. And even the most grandiose designs of the library, which were going to cost several million, upwards of almost $6 million that we looked at, I think the most that they would potentially add was around that same amount of square footage, maybe slightly more. So with the much more smaller scale interior redesign, we're actually able to pick up quite a bit of that extra square footage to really maximize that space and make it overall more functional, plus give more of an extra student commons area in the connector. And then the connector is actually part of a larger sort of first step of eventually, if it's approved and we still go that direction, a larger student atrium Main Street concept that would be several years down the line. So it all flows together to kind of maximize bang for the buck, as much space as we can possibly get out of the project, and different sort of student gathering areas rather than having all of the students concentrated over on one side of the building with the cafeteria and the library.
So yeah, so that makes total sense. And I appreciate the clarification. That's really helpful. So yeah, I think any more details that obviously you guys have, renderings, what have you, would love to be able to take a look at that if you can make that available. My next question is, I think this was maybe a couple of meetings ago or so. I had asked what would the savings look like from the perspective of budget, the things that we're not spending on now because of this COVID crisis that's going on. What would that look like if we went to June? I mean, I know everything's kind of said to May 15th, but do we have any update on what that would look like? I don't know if there's anything
Yeah,
that you guys
I could
have.
turn over to our business official, Lita.
We did several iterations of what the budget would look like, or what we call fund balance would look like. And our biggest area of savings would be transportation.
Right.
However, there are several transportation contractors that are contesting the fact that we're not paying them. So we have to be careful about considering the expenses associated with transportation and using that as fund balance. But right now we estimate that it'll be about $7 million that we would save up until June 30th.
Okay, that's fair. I think that the interesting thing about this is that we don't know what we don't know, and it's pretty bad. I mean, for everything that we're looking to plan to open. So as you, I don't know if you guys all know, but I work for Regeneron. I do see a lot of different statistics and a lot of different projections that we look at by way of planning forward, in addition to all the work that we're doing towards the COVID vaccine treatments and what have you. But I will say that we are the projections lately are showing that we won't get down to a real opening, even a phase 1 opening of our economy here in New York, until at least the early part of July, if not mid to late July, depending on what changes happen by way of testing. There's a lot of factors that go into this. So at that rate, I think it's just an important thing to keep in mind that we will likely see that this time will get extended from May 15th, May 30th, June 15th. And if you're already at June 15th, what's the purpose at that point in time? So I just want to leave that comment at that, just to be aware, so that we're not thinking that May 15th is realistic. That's in terms of what's going to open, just because the number of cases have not. Yeah, it's been going down a little bit, but it's also been ticking upwards as well in certain areas. So there have been ebbs and flows here and there. The other thing I wanted to also just bring up as a point too, that if all of if things kind of get pushed from all of this, I guess as a question, and it's probably much more of trying to get your guys' opinion than anything. If the budget does not get voted on like in June 1st, does this mean that it could potentially go into the summer potentially? And is that kind of what we're looking at?
Yeah, so I don't know the answer to that right now, Roger. I think everyone knows, and so do our legislators know, that we need to vote on the budget this year. Right, our fiscal year starts July 1st.
Yep.
So to not know what our budget is and have to vote on that in the summer would be devastating as well.
Okay.
I know that our legislators are looking at various scenarios, and so is SED and our governor.
Mhm.
And it really, ultimately is falling in the hands of the governor, I would say, and ultimately making that decision. Although
Yep.
there's been a lot of feedback on our part to give him some suggestions that in which it can be done, but delaying it, the other part of it too is, you kind of need to know where you stand, even that's why you have a May 19th, where you stand, and then you can start proceeding, whether it's in the space of staffing and other things like that. So I don't foresee any, there's no way that I see it happening in July. There has to be a decision made. The latest, I would say the latest is June 1st if they're going to move into June, because anything later than that just gets tighter, and the window gets tighter and tighter for us. So, it has to be in June, the latest.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Okay.
And I
All
promise
right.
the last thing.
Okay.
Last thing. I love the idea of having the community send out letters to our elected officials. Is there any way we could have a letter templatized along with the links of everybody? I think Greg was talking about before, along with having the emails and wherever, just to send it to. I know back when we were doing the entire the 9A petitioning to Albany,
Yep.
that there was a pre-formatted letter that was put out there, and it's certainly I'd be happy to help get a letter out. We get one in English and Spanish, and
Yep.
try to get that out there pre-formatted, and along with all the contacts, and we can try to pulse getting everybody out there to write to their officials.
So the letter we have already includes the call numbers and some
Okay.
key points that people can
Good.
make, and then Mr. Snecker just sent us a link to the Westput sort of template that could be sent to our community. So I'll make sure that that's included, and it'll make it easy for those that want to call or email to begin doing so. And we'd encourage everyone to just spread the word after, and we'll translate the letter as well to make sure that no matter what, families can call and should call, quite honestly.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate the
Thank
time.
you. Good seeing you.
Thank you.
Good seeing you as well.
Right. Thank you. Let's see if anybody else has. Brian, I'll leave it to you for our next audience question. And Brian, your mic is off if you want to. Okay.
Hey, Lisa, one comment to make earlier, but sort of one reply to Roger. And I assume we're going to think about this soon, but Ray, I know you've said in every letter you've sent out that to plan for school's delayed till April 15th, but plan for longer, or May 1st, but plan for longer, May 5th, whatever, May 15th, plan for longer. I know the assumption is plan for longer. Again, I was talking to my high school OHS friends the other day, one in LA, they're already having the active fall conversation about kids coming back in the fall, kids coming every other day, kids coming AM, PM. I think there's certainly a sense, I think the governor alluded to that yesterday in his comments, basically saying like it's going to take a lot of work to get a plan together. It's not happening anytime soon, and there's a lot of thinking that has to go on. So So again, I don't, we have enough on our plate to get this year in good shape, but I know soon we're gonna need to figure out a committee to figure, and we won't be alone. The whole country's gonna do the same thing, but it's all the questions of buses and classes, and again, and it's the unknown of, people are gonna start wandering around Georgia tomorrow, and you'll see what happens, and we'll see on the vaccine. I'm praying for Regeneron and Gilead and all these companies. So, we're 52 days into this, hopefully 104 days into this, there's some optimistic solutions that help September, but it's all that stuff. I think Ray, you in your Lohud article today, you talked about, and other people talked about, right, the parents who, even if we're open, I may not be comfortable sending their child, and all those unknowns that I don't think anyone believes that June 15th is realistic, but to me it doesn't. We're all going a day at a time.
I just wanted to go ahead. I'm sorry.
This is along this same line, so I'll get it out before you respond. But I think it's dawning on a lot of parents also that as tough as homeschool and working full time is, it might be harder to have no summer camps and have kids home and working full time. So I think that realization is dawning on a lot of people as well. And I don't know. I know normally the district has some kind of summer school options. I don't know what kind of thoughts have been given sort of in this whole same realm as to extending that, or maybe it's a conversation for another day.
Yeah, so I'll respond. And you may recall at the last presentation, we talked about, last board meeting, we talked about creating a reopening or / reentry plan. We're actually starting tomorrow. There's a small committee of individuals, not that there hasn't been thought about what it might look like, but starting to formulate a sort of a document that'll serve as the basis for our consideration for reopening. And there's a variety of categories embedded in there, from finances, as an example, like assuming that, with reentry that there might be materials that we gave out that we need to replenish, and what's that going to look like, to academics, and, what are the gaps that we can anticipate in students, how will we assess the needs, and how do you balance, filling in the gaps of things that students have missed with, new content that they, might be asked to learn. Socio-emotional needs is also a category that's considered, and health, obviously health and wellness, from, what might be new cleaning procedures that we might need to have, what are, what might our nurses need to do prior to students entering. I'm just using this as an example. It may or may not be something we need to consider, but I would say we consider whether we have to we have to put it into, as part of our procedures. Some schools have to take temperatures of kids when they're entering buildings. That's what we do with our childcare center right now. Our child, we have to do that. And what might that look like for us as a school district should we have to do something like that? And modified schedules is also something that, those are like the whole litany of things that we need to consider. And my hope is that we can, as a district, along with, our district leaders and our staff, that we can begin to think about that and weigh options. As it relates to summer school, it's easier for us to put into play the programs that we've always done, but I think we also have to, I think it would be prudent for us to begin thinking of a variety of other options. As a parent, I'm already anticipating the what ifs. Already, had planned, and I think all of us pre-plan what our summers might look like, or many of us do, and what that might not look like should camps not be available. The question is, if camps can't do it, can the school district do it? And I think that's a broader question for us to consider. And if there are considerations like social distancing that need to be put in place, what we've done traditionally for summer programs, I would say, is maybe something that we may not be able to do for this summer. However, we have to begin thinking about other virtual options for our students. And actually, I would just say that even more recently, we had a regional conversation about, potentially doing some things with BOCES and offering some regional, particularly at the secondary level. And these are just very, very early stages of conversations. But, is there something like a virtual high school that we can have, particularly for students that maybe fail the Regents course, but need the credit? One of the variables that was an issue, just using that as an example in the past, was transportation costs. That's no longer, an option or an issue for us. So we could use and work as a region, not necessarily having to do it as a school district, to serve our students. So these are all things that we need to explore and discuss as we go forward. What a virtual program in the elementaries might look like. There's some really great things that are happening now, but what does it look like, as we enter the summer with our students? The answer is yes, we can do it. We just need to think this out a little bit further. And that's why we're starting to engage in that, in greater detail actually tomorrow afternoon. So more to come. And then the other part of it too is how do you address social emotional needs of kids, virtually, and whether those are all options that we need to consider beyond just the academic. One of the greater priorities is their social emotional needs first, and then the academic second. So more to come on that.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to go to our audience member. Please say your name and your address and ask your question or share your comment. Welcome.
Would that be me?
That would be you, Beth.
Okay, Beth Sniffen, 3 Stormy Town Road, and I can ask my question?
Yes.
Okay, so we just got off the phone. We had a region board meeting with Shelley Mayer, and we spoke to her about the budget concerns for the districts. So she, going into the June 1st date, she was saying, her concern with that was that the legislators had given the governor some leeway with the budget to make some cuts through the year. So he can make cuts like June 30th to education and healthcare. So, wouldn't it be worth it for the schools to, even though it's better to know to pass our budget June 1st, wouldn't it be better for us to maybe pass our budget later on in June when we really know what cuts he's going to do?
I mean, I'll answer the first part. The clearer the path we know, the better. Right. So that's one. Two is that I think it's incumbent upon us, and I trust in Alita and her work, and along with the rest of the business department, in going through scenarios. April 30th is the big day, right? That's the first round of discussions. With that said, my understanding is that he has the wherewithal at any point, if funding's not coming in, to cut state education or funding to schools. April 30th is the first time that we're facing this, but moving forward, there might, and I think they've given him the authority to do so. So, what we want to avoid, just strategic, obviously, is anything that involves mid-year program cuts to schools or anything else like that. Alita earlier just shared an estimated number that we might anticipate, or we should anticipate, should, the governor make that decision this year, which was about 2.5 million, Alita?
Yes.
Yeah, in lost revenue, and and having to, what I'll term, quote unquote, find it within our budget. As we go into next year with contingent on the flexibility we finding 2.5 is, and at any point, is never easy. So But, you know, we just have to have scenarios for it. That's really the point. And go through, you know, this is in leadership, you have these scenario planning, you go through those what ifs and make sure that you have responses to those what ifs, so that you're prepared. If it involves, you know, not suggesting, but if there were a scenario to, you know, that there were cuts, what would that look like? If not, what's the alternative to fill in the gap? And, you know, those are things that we're talking about now. I'm not sure waiting to June 30th is really, you know, or anything further than that, or waiting into July is, you know, an option, because we, you know, again, our fiscal year ends June 30th. So we need to know what our budget is for next year. And we need to begin expending money for next year, like summer programs and other things that we're talking about. So we need a direction in that case as well. So we can start filling the needs of kids, and ensuring staff, like, this is the program, this is the staffing we're going to have. You know, I also need to be fair and honest to them in terms of what we're looking at for resources, and also give our principals and our leaders enough time over the summer to plan for the opening.
So just, so the other point I just want to make is that West Pud has, you know, these great letters that are on their website. I'm sure Frank has something to do with that. I think that if we can get those out to our community, and I would help in any way possible, I think that they're great to get out. And I think that we should try to do that sooner rather than later.
So my guess is Mr. Schnecker probably did have a lot to do with these letters, or have some voice in at least overseeing it. He's already sent us the link during the meeting just to make sure. It was not included in the original letter, but I've since then added it. So we'll get it out, and, you know, it's either calls or the letters obviously are an easy. So the easier we can make it for people, the best. So it'll be in there, and it'll get out tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I want to see if anybody else from the audience would have a question or a comment. Just raise your hand virtually, and we'll bring you into we'll unmute your mic. Let's see, I'll give you a few seconds. It's really great to see a lot of people attending the meeting.
See some educators out there too.
Yeah, great. Yeah, okay. All right, so everybody okay now? Everybody, questions have all been asked and comments, and we'll have, again, time to have board dialogue after we vote on the resolutions in the work session. So moving into the work session, Illy, if you could bring up the agenda. Again, thank you. And Illy, thank you so much for all your, you had to go virtual as well with our meetings and agendas and presentations. So really appreciate all that work that you're doing. And while you're doing that, I wanted to also say that Nicole Reese has also been working on our website to update the COVID-19 wellness page, and Illy as well, working on the budget, the Board of Education page to make sure that everybody sees the upcoming meetings and the previous meetings. Okay. Wow, that's small. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. I'd like to take a motion to vote on resolutions 5.1 and 5.2.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Resolution 5.1, resolution regarding the election of Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES board members, and 5.2, resolution regarding the Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES proposed 2020-21 school year budget. Okay. Any questions or comments?
Lisa, I just want to clarify, I'm voting via my phone, so it's going to say on the recording that I'm on mute, but I just want to point that out, that I am voting.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, thank you. I'd like to take a motion to vote on resolution 6.1 through 6.4.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay. 6.1, resolution regarding rescind of civil service resignations. 6.2, resolution regarding professional staff resignations. 6.3, resolution regarding professional staff appointments. And 6.4, resolution regarding approval of school volunteers. Any comments or questions? Any questions?
Just a
Okay.
thank you to all the volunteers that are, helping us with this virtual academic lift.
Thank you. All right. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Thank you. Moving down to, okay, audience recognition again. Okay, looks like we have another question out there. We're going to move you back in.
She'll be right with us.
Okay, great. That's fast. Okay, great.
I just wanted
Stephen.
to congratulate Frank on, isn't he on the BOCES board?
Yeah, so what was voted on tonight was the appointment of 3 members, and then the 2 are incumbents, and the third is Jennifer Rosen from Briarcliff, who I think I've had a lot of experience with over the years, and I think will do a really great job and bring a good perspective to that board. So I'm grateful for this board's support. Putnam Northern Western BOCES does a lot aside from providing special education services, career and technical services. There's a lot of collaboration amongst the region. So a lot of the things that we talked about tonight, in planning for, what if scenarios and how we go are really happening with school superintendents and, business officials, assistant superintendents in a lot of different areas. So I just, there's a lot of times I'm very proud of our district for all the great things we do. And I'm proud of BOCES and what we've done at Putnam Northern over the past 2 months. I think, as has been mentioned a lot of times tonight, there's really been a lot of great efforts in difficult times. And so I appreciate this board's support for that work. I mean, a good number of our students are served by Putnam Northern, and, we're looking, as everybody is, to try to maintain, services for students amidst a lot of difficult financial uncertainty, right?
Well, we're very proud that you serve on the board as well. So you're representing us well. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth.
Yeah, I echo those words. Thank you, Frank, for your service on the BOCES board. And I have a experience now with one of my children is in the BOCES program, and it's amazing the work that they've had to do to switch over as well virtually for all the component districts. So really just congratulations, Frank, and to everything that they're doing there as well. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's move into board dialogue. We talked already about the committee that met, the facilities committee. Anybody else open to any other committee meetings that happened from the last time we had our board meeting?
So not a committee meeting per se, but with the parochial school in the area, St. Augustine's, I saw today the Archdiocese extended the school closures till May 22nd for them. So not to be a pessimist, but I don't think we'll be back on May 15th. I think it'll extend a little further. Just wanted to say that. Also wanted to thank our president, Lisa. I see her every Friday at Stop and Shop with Galata House serving our community. So hats off to you. Thank you.
Thank you. You too, Aaron. And I know there's a lot of people and Beth Sniffen helping with the Galata House deliveries and meal distributions, and just so many people in the community, whether you're staying home, which is really important to, as they say, slow the spread of the virus, and doing the volunteer work, checking on your neighbors. I mean, it's just, every day is a new day, and, we're seeing needs grow. in the community. We're also seeing volunteers and everybody else. I mean, everybody is doing their part. So thank you. Wanted to also say that there are, just so everybody knows, there's deliveries from the Galata House on Tuesdays and Fridays. Also Feeding Westchester every Tuesday does non-perishable distributions at Star Bethlehem and Market Square. And I know that the Ossining Pantry is also open to help any community members that need assistance, food assistance, or groceries. And we are continuing to add to the website for the school for these resources. In addition, the village and the town also have their resources on their pages in Westchester County. So yeah, just keeping everybody informed of where they can get help. And the Ossining Library, I want to mention them as well. They've been really great getting all the information out there, virtual programs as well, and ebooks, and just really, really good stuff we're seeing. And again, as I said, it's so much to get through. And it's really great that everybody is pitching in to virtually offer a variety of different programs. And our PTA as well. And I think I mentioned that earlier in terms of the programming that they're doing and the partnerships that we have and on there as well to bring recorded videos to our students and so forth. There's a lot happening. Okay.
I'll just add, it's been said a lot tonight, and I don't want to recover territory that's already been covered. Certainly my colleagues and, Dr. Sanchez and Ms. Super brought it up, but the importance of the federal stimulus bill, the next bill that comes out, is really important. And, and Beth brought it up too in her comments, and they met with Shelley Mayer. But basically, the governor is projecting a 50% cut to education state aid, and he's not being clear is that it won't be just the rest of this year, the rest of the school year, but into next year. His critics will say the number is probably closer to 20%, but if stimulus funding doesn't come through the federal funds, if education funding is not included in the next stimulus bills, we're going to be in we're likely to be seeing very, very difficult, shortfalls. And so I think this year, the advocacy efforts really shift a little bit, and I'm certainly sensitive to people are dealing with a lot of different things, and advocacy is probably at the low end of the list. But for those that are, I think we really should try to use the resources out there to basically put some pressure on our officials in Washington so that basically they're clear that education funding, you won't be able to maintain levels of services without a commitment from that level. And I certainly share the governor's comments that we really need to, we can't let New York be left out in this one. So, Beth is, for those that may not know, Beth is the director of the regional Westchester East Putnam Regional PTA, and she works closely with all the PTAs and does a great job of that. So just the more we can spread the messaging around and make some noise about it, it would be really great. So I would look to Beth, and it sounds like we'll put things out with the Oblast as well, and we'll link up to resources like the School Boards Association. But I really think this year the advocacy really is around the federal funds, because that's going to make the difference.
Thank you. All right. Anything else to report?
Well, I was, as you all know, on the town hall West Put call last Thursday. A lot of the discussion was centered around grading and graduation plans, budget, of course, staff morale and things of that nature. We share a lot of similar concerns, of course, with all the other districts around the state. Some of the things that stood out, one of which I pointed out in the beginning of the meeting, regarding advocacy efforts and how, it's a good idea to shift them, as we've been saying tonight, towards the federal leg of the government to try to, ease the shortfalls that are sure to come. Another interesting conversation was around graduation plans and what alternative graduation plans look like for some districts. Some districts had less of I guess, revisiting to do, because a lot of them house their graduations on site. Districts like ours that sort of outsource the space where we do our graduations are trying to be a bit more innovative. A lot of people agree that while virtual graduations are better than nothing, it still isn't, you know, essentially enough. It's a milestone in students' life, and some of the other districts are exploring ways to kind of adhere to the social distancing mandates, and find ways around trying to give some type of graduation to the students. They were even talking about things sort of like drive through graduations and things of that nature, which I thought was interesting. A lot of districts are really torn up about having to like forego graduation and proms and things of that nature, even trying to combine the two somehow so that it's not totally a wash. A lot of the other things that were discussed, a lot of things are up in the air. So there wasn't a lot. Everyone is kind of like waiting for the next week or the next announcement before, any real decisions or plans could be made, especially around the budget. I mean, even as we were on the call, that was when the governor was on the TV announcing that the stay-at-home orders were going to be extended to May 15th. So it just gave, some sense of how this is just, as soon as you try to get your footing in one area, it keeps shifting, but, that's to be expected. So I think, what I found interesting, or I guess that stood out the most, was, of course, the advocacy efforts in other districts' goals to try to support their seniors, as I know we're trying to do in different ways, even, in collaboration with the PTA and things of that nature, to kind of keep their morale boosted at this time. So perhaps, I know there are plans in place in terms of alternative graduation plans, but maybe as a board, those are discussions we can start exploring a bit more deeper, what that looks like for our seniors who are not, being able to participate in a lot of the milestones that they would be doing this time of year. And that's about it. I mean, it wasn't, not to get too into the weeds on the meeting, because like I said, a lot of it was a lot of similarities with us and other districts, but those are the aspects of the meeting that really stood out in terms of what some districts are doing to cope with the circumstances.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. Anybody else? So this goes without saying, but I just want to say again, we've never been here before, and I think every day is a new day. We wait for new announcements. We're trying to piece information together. We're keeping everybody in our thoughts that have, and their families that have lost their lives and that are suffering. And it's just been really hard for everybody. And there's a lot of, I know, people just stepping up. So just really appreciate, and I appreciate the audience. We appreciate you and coming out and asking questions and, trying to clarify the budget questions and, and the distant learning. And, as we're seeing across the state, there's no, even if we had a year to do this, I don't think there's any simple way to do this in the household of everybody and to do it equitably. It's just very difficult to be done. As we know, education and education buildings are the great equalizer. So more to come, and I really appreciate, Dr. Sanchez, I know you're on a lot of different calls and also helping to lead the superintendents in the area and just collaborating and hearing all the different collaborations going on. I think that's a lot of positive that's coming also out of this in terms of everybody sharing their resources and sharing their ideas. The innovation is quite amazing to watch. So just want to share my appreciation. And so we're going to have our next meeting coming up will be May 6th. We were scheduled to have an April 29th board meeting, but we switched it to May 6th because of the next discussion from the governor in terms of revenue and state aid information that will be coming out. And of course, we really appreciate the school putting, I know Dr. Sandridge, you're doing a Facebook Live once a week and a read aloud, and Carrie Ann and Brian and, everybody else are doing a lot of different things, and Alita and everybody, and just keeping us up to date. And again, there's just a lot happening. So go to our website, and, if you have any questions, just go to the Just Ask email and send us in any of your questions. And with that, I'd like to take a motion. If there's no more comments or questions, I'd like to take a motion to move into our executive meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Be well, and we'll see you at the next meeting.